The crimson surface of Titan stretched endlessly beneath the massive dome of the Earth Federation Military Academy's advanced training facility. Inside the gleaming corridors, hundreds of cadets from across the solar system prepared for their final practical examinations before deployment to the frontier worlds. Among them, Cadet Elena Voss stood before the tactical hologram display in Bay 7, her dark eyes analyzing the three-dimensional battlefield projection with the intensity of a seasoned strategist. At 22, Elena had already distinguished herself as one of the Academy's most promising spatial tactics specialists. Her instructors often remarked on her uncanny ability to see patterns where others saw chaos, to find weakness in seemingly impenetrable defenses. Today, that ability would be tested in ways she could never have imagined. "Attention all cadets," Commander Harrison's voice echoed through the training base speakers. "Final exercise parameters are now being uploaded to your tactical displays. You will be conducting reconnaissance patrols along the contested border regions of Zoraxian space. Remember, this is a training exercise, but the enemy positions you'll encounter are based on real intelligence data from the Jarek outpost on Trogar." Elena's fingers danced across her console, pulling up the mission briefings. The Jarek outpost was a notorious Zoraxian stronghold, positioned on the mineral-rich world of Trogar, at the edge of the contested zone. Intelligence reports described it as virtually impregnable, defended by state-of-the-art energy shields, and manned by some of the Empire's most elite troops, under the command of Colonel Drac Jarek himself. "The training vessel Aurora will serve as your mobile command base," Harrison continued. "Your mission is reconnaissance only. You are explicitly forbidden from engaging enemy forces unless in immediate danger. If confronted by superior numbers, surrender protocols are to be followed to the letter." Elena frowned slightly at the last instruction. Surrender had never sat well with her, even in training scenarios. Her tactical mind immediately began working through alternatives, contingencies, that might avoid such an outcome. She pushed the thoughts aside for now and focused on her team assignments. Lieutenant Mira Kane would serve as their defense systems specialist, her expertise in electronic warfare and shield penetration legendary among the cadets. Warrant Officer Tal Ruiz handled their assault modules, the sleek one-person fighters that could launch from the Aurora for rapid strikes. Sergeant Novak piloted their support wing, coordinating the various spacecraft that would accompany them on patrol. As Elena reviewed the team roster, she felt a familiar surge of confidence. They were good, perhaps the best team the Academy had produced in years. Whatever the Zoraxians threw at them, they would be ready. The Aurora launched from Titan's orbital platform 3 hours later, its sleek hull gleaming against the starfield as it accelerated toward the jump point. Elena stood on the bridge watching the tactical displays as they transitioned into Zoraxian contested space. Everything appeared routine, their sensors detecting only the usual background radiation and distant merchant traffic. "Contact, bearing 27 Mark IV. Sergeant Novak reported from the sensor station. Multiple ships configuration unknown." Elena moved to the tactical display, her training kicking in automatically. The contacts were moving in a coordinated pattern, too organized to be merchants, too numerous to be a casual patrol. "How many ships, Sergeant?" "I count 8, possibly 10. They're jamming our long-range sensors." Novak's voice carried a note of concern. "Configuration matches Zoraxian scout vessels." Before Elena could respond, the communication board erupted in static. A harsh voice cut through the interference, speaking in the guttural tones of the Zoraxian military dialect. "Federation vessel, you have violated Imperial space. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded." Elena felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't part of the exercise scenario they had been briefed on. The Zoraxian patrol was real, and they were vastly outnumbered. Commander Harrison's instructions echoed in her mind: surrender protocols if confronted by superior numbers. "Elena." Lieutenant Kane's voice was tight with tension. "They're powering weapons. 8 confirmed hostiles, possibly more beyond sensor range." Elena stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. The Aurora was a training vessel lightly armed and designed for education rather than combat. Against 8 Zoraxian scouts, they had virtually no chance in a direct engagement. The logical choice, the choice her instructors expected, was immediate surrender. But Elena's eyes had caught something else on the display, a detail that sent her strategic mind spinning in an entirely different direction. The Zoraxian formation showed a gap, a weakness in their sensor coverage that could be exploited. More importantly, their aggressive positioning suggested they were confident in their overwhelming advantage. Overconfidence, Elena knew, was often the greatest weakness of all. Broadcast surrender on all channels. Elena ordered, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. Tell them we're complying with their demands. Kane looked at her with surprise. Elena, are you sure this might still be part of the exercise? It's not, Elena replied grimly. Those are real Zoraxian ships with real weapons and real opportunities. She activated her personal communication device, speaking in a code that only her team would understand. Mira, I need you to run a deep scan on their shield configurations while they're bringing us aboard. Look for any defensive weaknesses you can find. Kane's eyes widened as she realized what Elena was suggesting. You're not seriously thinking of... I'm thinking of keeping all our options open, Elena interrupted. Tal, prep the assault modules for emergency launch, but keep them powered down. Novak, plot a course that takes us past their formation's blind spot. As the Aurora was tractored aboard the lead Zoraxian vessel, Elena forced herself to remain calm. The surrender was genuine, but it was also the first move in a much larger game. While the Zoraxians secured their ship and began standard prisoner processing, Elena's team would be gathering intelligence and positioning themselves for something no one would expect from a group of Academy cadets. The Zoraxian commander who greeted them was exactly what Elena had expected, arrogant, dismissive, and thoroughly convinced of his own superiority. Captain Vex Theron was a career military officer who had spent decades fighting Federation forces along the border. To him, a group of human cadets represented nothing more than a minor prize useful for intelligence, but hardly worth serious attention. So, Theron sneered as Elena and her team were escorted to a holding bay aboard his vessel. The Federation sends children to patrol our borders now. How utterly pathetic. Elena kept her expression neutral, playing the role of the defeated cadet. We were on a training exercise, Captain. We had no intention of violating Imperial space. Training exercise. Theron laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the metal corridors. Yes, I'm sure you've learned a valuable lesson today about the price of Federation arrogance. You'll be transferred to the Jarek outpost for interrogation. Colonel Jarek always enjoys meeting young Federation officers. As they were locked in the holding bay, Elena's mind was already working furiously. The mention of Jarek outpost changed everything. Instead of being taken to some unknown prison facility, they were being delivered directly to the target they had been studying in their tactical exercises. It was an opportunity that seemed almost too good to be true. Mira, Elena whispered once she was certain they weren't being monitored. Tell me you found something useful. Kane nodded, her eyes bright with excitement. Their shield grid has a critical vulnerability. The harmonics are calibrated for large-scale attacks, but they're susceptible to precisely modulated energy bursts at close range. If we could get an assault module within 50 meters of their generator array, we could bring down their entire defensive network, Elena finished. Tal, how long would you need to prep the modules? Ruiz considered for a moment. If I could access the Aurora's launch bay, maybe 20 minutes. But Elena, even if we could disable their shields, we're talking about assaulting a major Zoraxian military installation with Academy training equipment. Elena's smile was predatory. Sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't expect you to have. Besides, this is exactly the kind of tactical problem we've been training for. The only difference is that this time it's real. Over the next several hours, as their transport ship traveled toward the Jarek outpost, Elena's team refined their plan. Using hand signals and coded conversations, they coordinated a complex operation that would require split-second timing and absolute precision. When they arrived at Trogar, they would have one chance to turn the tables on their captors. The planet Trogar loomed ahead, a harsh world of red stone and metallic ore deposits. The Jarek outpost clung to a mountainside like a metallic parasite, its defensive towers and energy barriers creating an intimidating silhouette against the alien sky. As their transport descended toward the landing platform, Elena could see the massive scale of the installation. It was larger than the Academy's entire facility, designed to house thousands of troops and serve as a major staging area for Zoraxian military operations. Colonel Drac Jarek was waiting for them on the landing platform, a tall figure in an immaculate uniform that radiated authority and menace. His reputation preceded him throughout Federation space as one of the Empire's most ruthless and effective commanders. Under his leadership, the Jarek outpost had never been successfully attacked, earning him a position of considerable influence within the Zoraxian military hierarchy. "Welcome to Trogar." Jarek's voice carried a mocking tone as Elena and her team were escorted from the transport. "I trust your journey was educational. You are about to receive an even more valuable lesson in the futility of Federation resistance to Imperial authority." Elena maintained her submissive posture, but her eyes were cataloging every detail of the outpost's layout. The main power grid, the command center location, the positioning of guard towers, all of it was being recorded in her memory for the operation to come. When Jarek turned to speak with his subordinates, Elena caught Kane's eye and nodded almost imperceptibly. The signal set their plan in motion. As they were being processed through the outpost's security systems, Ruiz used a concealed tool to activate a previously planted virus in the Aurora's computer systems. The virus was designed to look like a standard malfunction, but it would actually give him remote access to the ship's assault module bay. Meanwhile, Kane began transmitting carefully modulated signals that would map the outpost's shield grid in real time. Elena's role was perhaps the most dangerous. She needed to gather intelligence on the command center's location and security, while appearing to be nothing more than a defeated prisoner. As they were escorted through the outpost's main corridors, she memorized guard rotations, equipment placements, and most importantly, the location of the central power distribution network. "You seem quite observant for a defeated cadet," Colonel Jarek commented, as they passed through the main command level. "I wonder what thoughts are going through that tactical mind of yours." Elena met his gaze steadily. "I was thinking about how impressive this installation is, Colonel. The Federation could learn a great deal from Zoraxian military engineering." Jarek's laugh was genuinely amused. "Indeed, they could, young cadet. Perhaps you'll have an opportunity to share those observations with your superiors. Eventually." They were finally secured in holding cells deep within the outpost's lower levels. As soon as the guards departed, Elena's team went to work implementing the next phase of their plan. Using equipment they had managed to conceal during processing, they began creating a detailed map of the outpost's internal structure and defensive systems. "The shield generators are exactly where the intelligence reports predicted," Kane whispered, as she worked with her portable scanner. 3 primary nodes with the main control center located in the command tower. If we can take out the control center, the entire grid will collapse. Ruiz nodded from his position by the cell door, where he was monitoring guard movements. "I've got remote access to the Aurora. The assault modules are prepped and ready for launch on your signal. But Elena, once we start this, there's no going back. We'll be committed to either victory or death." Elena understood the stakes perfectly. What they were contemplating went far beyond a training exercise or even a typical military operation. They were 4 Academy cadets, preparing to assault one of the most heavily defended installations in Zoraxian space. By any rational analysis, they should have no chance of success. But Elena had built her reputation on finding victory in impossible situations, and she had never faced a challenge that excited her more than this one. "Novak," she called softly to their communications specialist, "can you establish contact with Federation Command?" "Negative," Novak replied, after checking his equipment. "The outpost jamming field is too strong. We're completely cut off until we can disable their primary transmitter." Elena nodded. It was what she had expected, but it also meant they were truly on their own. Whatever they accomplished here would be without backup, without support, and without any possibility of rescue if things went wrong. "All right, team." Elena's voice carried a quiet intensity that her teammates had learned to respect. "In 30 minutes, we're going to do something that military historians will either call the most brilliant tactical operation of the century or the most spectacularly stupid mistake ever made by Academy cadets. Either way, it's going to be memorable." At exactly 0200 hours local time, Elena's plan went into action with clockwork precision. Ruiz activated the remote launch sequence for the Aurora's assault modules, sending the sleek fighters screaming through Trogar's atmosphere toward the outpost. Meanwhile, Kane initiated her electronic warfare protocols, using the concealed transmitters to begin mapping and disrupting the outpost's sensor network. The first indication that something was wrong came from the perimeter guard towers. Confused reports filtered into the command center as sensors detected multiple fast-moving objects approaching from various directions. The objects were too small to be ships, but too sophisticated to be natural phenomena. Colonel Jarek was roused from his quarters by his aide, a nervous young officer whose hands shook as he delivered the report. "Sir, perimeter defenses are detecting unidentified contacts. They appear to be some kind of assault craft, but our sensors can't get a clear reading." Jarek's eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical displays in his private command center. The approaching objects were clearly military in nature, but their configuration didn't match any known Federation design. More puzzling still, they seemed to be operating independently of any mothership or support vessels. "Where did they come from?" Jarek demanded. "Unknown, sir. They appeared suddenly on our sensors approaching from multiple vectors. Our long-range scans show no Federation ships in the area." Jarek's mind worked through the possibilities. A sneak attack by Federation Special Forces was the most likely explanation, but the timing seemed suspicious. Why would the Federation choose to attack just hours after his men had captured a group of Academy cadets? Unless... His eyes widened as a terrible possibility occurred to him. "Check the holding cells immediately," he ordered. "Verify that our prisoners are secure." Meanwhile, 4 levels below, Elena and her team were implementing the most dangerous part of their plan. Using cutting tools concealed in their equipment, they had breached their cell walls and were moving through the outpost's maintenance tunnels toward the central power distribution center. Their timing had to be perfect. The assault modules would reach their targets in less than 10 minutes. "Motion sensors ahead," Kane warned, as they approached a major junction in the tunnel system. 2 guards probably conducting routine patrols. Elena drew the improvised weapons they had created from salvaged equipment. They weren't lethal, but they would be sufficient to incapacitate the guards long enough for the team to pass. "Tal, you and Novak take the left approach. Mira and I will come from the right. Non-lethal takedowns only." The engagement was brief and efficient. The Zeraxian guards were skilled professionals, but they had no reason to expect an attack from within their own installation. Within minutes, Elena's team had secured the junction and was moving toward their primary objective. Above them, the assault modules reached their targets with devastating precision. Kane's virus had provided them with detailed targeting data, allowing the automated systems to strike the most vulnerable points in the outpost's defensive grid. Explosions erupted across the facility as shield generators overloaded and power conduits were severed. In the command center, Colonel Jarek watched in growing fury as his supposedly impregnable defenses crumbled under a coordinated assault from weapons that shouldn't have existed. "How many attackers are we facing?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir." His tactical officer replied, his voice tight with stress. The assault craft appeared to be unmanned, operating under some kind of advanced AI control. But sir, I'm getting reports that our internal security has been breached as well. The prisoners. What about the prisoners? They've escaped, sir. Guard teams found their cells empty, and 2 men unconscious in the lower maintenance levels. Jarek's face went pale as the full scope of what was happening became clear. The Academy cadets hadn't simply escaped. They had somehow orchestrated a coordinated assault on his installation, using resources that shouldn't have been available to them. It was impossible, yet it was happening before his eyes. Lock down all levels, he ordered. Deploy internal security teams to every critical system, and send a message to Sector Command. We are under attack by unknown Federation forces. 5 levels below, Elena and her team reached the power distribution center just as the lights flickered and emergency systems activated throughout the outpost. Kane immediately went to work on the main control panels, her fingers flying over the alien interfaces as she implemented the shutdown sequences they had planned. I can give you maybe 5 minutes of total system failure, she reported. After that, their backup generators will come online and we'll lose our advantage. Elena nodded. 5 minutes would have to be enough. Tell Novak you know your assignments. Mira, as soon as you've completed the shutdown, meet us at the command center. This is where we find out if all those tactical simulations were worth anything. As the outpost's main power grid collapsed, plunging the installation into darkness, Elena began moving through corridors she had memorized during their initial processing. Emergency lighting provided minimal illumination, but it was enough for her to navigate toward the command tower, where Colonel Jarek would be coordinating the defense. The next few minutes would determine not only their survival, but whether 4 Academy cadets could accomplish what seasoned Federation forces had never managed: the capture of the Jarek outpost. Elena moved through the darkened corridors with the confidence of someone who had spent months studying the installation's layout in tactical simulations. Every turn, every junction, every security checkpoint was exactly where she expected it to be. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the metal walls, but she had no difficulty finding her way toward the command tower. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of confusion and panic as Zoraxian troops struggled to understand what was happening to their supposedly secure installation. Orders were being shouted in multiple directions, but without centralized coordination, the defenders were reacting rather than responding strategically. As Elena reached the main lift shaft leading to the command center, she encountered her first serious resistance. A squad of Zoraxian elite guards had taken defensive positions around the lift entrance, their energy weapons trained on the corridor approaches. These weren't the regular troops who had been caught off guard by the power failure. These were the Colonel's personal security detail, trained to protect the command center against any threat. Elena pressed herself against the corridor wall, analyzing the tactical situation. Direct assault was impossible. The guards had superior position and firepower, but she didn't need to defeat them through brute force. Her assault modules had been programmed for precisely this type of scenario. Activating her personal communicator, Elena sent a coded signal to the Aurora's automated systems. 30 seconds later, one of the assault modules crashed through the tower's outer wall at precisely the right level, its weapon systems targeting the guard positions with surgical precision. The resulting explosion and energy discharge eliminated the immediate threat while leaving the corridor structure intact. As Elena raced up the emergency stairs toward the command center, she could hear Ruiz and Novak implementing their part of the plan elsewhere in the installation. Their job was to secure the outpost's communications array and prevent any calls for reinforcement from reaching Zoraxian command. The sounds of combat echoing through the building suggested they were encountering significant resistance. Elena reached the command center level just as the backup power systems began coming online. Through the transparent aluminum viewing panels, she could see Colonel Jarek and his staff working frantically to restore order to their defensive systems. The colonel himself stood at the central tactical display, his face a mask of cold fury as he directed his remaining forces. "Sir," one of his officers reported, "internal security teams are reporting enemy contacts throughout the installation. They appear to be using our own maintenance systems against us." "How many attackers?" Jarek demanded. "Unknown, sir. Possibly a full Federation Special Operations team. They've disabled our primary sensor grid and taken control of several critical systems." Elena smiled grimly as she prepared her final approach. Let them think they were facing a full military unit. The longer it took them to realize they were being defeated by 4 Academy cadets, the better her chances of success. Using shape charges that Ruiz had prepared from salvaged equipment, Elena blasted through the command center's secondary entrance. The explosion sent Zoraxian officers diving for cover as smoke and debris filled the strategic nerve center of the installation. "Colonel Jarek," Elena called out, as she stepped through the smoking breach, her improvised weapon trained on the command staff. "I believe you wanted to give me a lesson in the futility of Federation resistance. Consider this my response to your curriculum." Jarek spun toward her, his hand moving toward his sidearm. His face showed a mixture of disbelief and fury as he recognized the young cadet who had been brought to his installation as a prisoner just hours earlier. "Impossible," he breathed. "You're a cadet, a student. How could you—" "I'm Elena Voss," she replied calmly, "and I apparently learned more from Federation tactical training than you learned from years of Imperial military education. Your installation is now under Federation control." The next few minutes were a deadly game of psychological warfare as much as tactical maneuvering. Jarek was a veteran commander with decades of experience, but he was also a man whose entire worldview was being shattered by the impossible reality of his situation. Elena used that confusion to her advantage, systematically dismantling his confidence, while her teammates secured the rest of the installation. "You have perhaps a dozen troops left under your command," Elena informed him, as status reports filtered in through her communicator. "My people have taken control of your power grid, your communications array, and your defensive systems. You can surrender now and retain some dignity, or you can force me to demonstrate just how thoroughly you've been outmaneuvered." Jarek's response was to draw his weapon and dive behind the command console. The resulting firefight was brief, but intense energy bolts crackling through the air as Elena used her superior position and tactical knowledge to pin down the remaining Zoraxian officers. When Kane arrived with explosive charges that threatened to destroy the entire command center, the colonel finally accepted the reality of his situation. "I surrender," Jarek called out, his voice thick with humiliation. "In the name of the Zoraxian Empire, I formally surrender this installation to Federation forces." Elena accepted the surrender with professional dignity, though inside she was fighting not to show her excitement at what they had accomplished. 4 Academy cadets had done the impossible. They had captured one of the most important Zoraxian military installations in contested space. As the sun rose over Trogar's red landscape, Elena stood on the command tower's observation deck, watching Federation reinforcement ships descend from orbit. The response team had arrived exactly as her carefully planned messages had requested, ready to secure the installation and establish a permanent Federation presence in the system. Commander Harrison materialized from the lead transport, his face showing a mixture of amazement and stern disapproval as he surveyed the situation. Elena snapped to attention as he approached, prepared to face whatever consequences her unauthorized actions might bring. "Cadet Voss." Harrison's voice was carefully controlled. "I believe my orders were quite explicit regarding surrender protocols when faced with superior enemy forces." "Yes, sir," Elena replied. "I followed those orders exactly. We surrendered to the Zoraxian patrol as instructed." Harrison's eyebrow raised slightly. "And yet you somehow managed to capture an entire enemy installation in the process." "The situation evolved, sir. New tactical opportunities presented themselves, and I felt it was my duty to pursue them in the interests of Federation security." For a long moment, Harrison studied her face, searching for any sign of uncertainty or regret. Finding none, he finally allowed a slight smile to cross his features. Cadet Voss, what you and your team accomplished here represents either the most spectacular violation of direct orders in Academy history, or the most brilliant tactical operation ever executed by student personnel. Possibly both. Elena maintained her military bearing. Yes, sir. The strategic intelligence we've gained from capturing this installation intact will be invaluable to Federation forces throughout this sector. Colonel Jarek's personal files alone contain enough information to reshape our understanding of Zoraxian military capabilities. I'm pleased to hear that, sir. Harrison moved to the observation window, looking out over the captured installation. Of course, there will have to be an inquiry. Multiple inquiries, in fact. The Academy Board will want to understand exactly how 4 cadets managed to accomplish what we've been planning to attempt with a full military assault. Elena nodded. She had expected as much. I understand, sir. However, Harrison continued, I suspect that inquiry will conclude with recommendations for commendations rather than court-martial proceedings. What you've done here, Voss, represents exactly the kind of initiative and tactical thinking the Federation needs in its officers. As Elena watched the Federation banner being raised over the Jarek outpost, she reflected on the events that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a routine training exercise had evolved into something that would likely be studied in military academies for decades to come. But even as she savored the success of their operation, Elena knew that this was just the beginning. The Zoraxian Empire would not simply accept the loss of such an important installation. They would respond with force, and when they did, the Federation would need officers capable of meeting that challenge with the same kind of innovative thinking that had won them Trogar. Dr. Martinez, the Federation's leading expert on Zoraxian military technology, arrived on the second day to begin analyzing the captured equipment and intelligence. His initial reports confirmed Elena's assessment. The information they had gained would provide strategic advantages for years to come. The defensive systems alone represent a quantum leap in our understanding of Imperial technology. Dr. Martinez explained to Elena as they toured the installation's technical sections. Your decision to capture rather than destroy this facility may have changed the entire balance of power in the sector. Elena nodded, but her attention was already focused on the next challenge. Intelligence reports indicated that the Zoraxians were massing forces for a counterattack, and it would fall to Federation defenders to hold what had been won through tactical brilliance and sheer audacity. As she stood in the command center that had once belonged to Colonel Jarek, Elena Voss understood that her real education was just beginning. The Academy had taught her the theory of warfare. Trogar had shown her the reality. Whatever came next, she would be ready for it. The war for the contested zones was far from over, but for the first time in years, the advantage belonged to the Federation. And it had been won not by superior numbers or advanced technology, but by 4 Academy cadets who refused to accept that surrender was their only option. Elena smiled as she reviewed the tactical displays showing Federation forces taking positions throughout the system. Sometimes, the best weapon really was the one your enemy never expected you to have. In this case, it had been the determination and ingenuity of the human spirit, wielded by a young woman who had learned that rules were meant to be broken when victory hung in the balance. The legend of the Jarek operation would grow in the telling, inspiring a new generation of Federation officers to think beyond conventional tactics and embrace the kind of creative problem-solving that had turned certain defeat into impossible victory. But for Elena Voss, it was simply the first chapter in what promised to be a remarkable military career. As the captured installation hummed with activity around her, Elena began planning for the challenges ahead. The Zoraxians would come, and when they did, they would face not just the cadets who had captured their fortress, but the seasoned defenders who had learned from their example. The real test of her tactical abilities was still to come. But she had already proven the most important lesson of all, that sometimes when the enemy expects you to surrender, the best response is to capture their base instead.